So John, as you're coming up to your 10-year mark in the roofing industry, what are some things that you've seen change over the past couple of years that may affect things may affect the roofing industry in the future versus what you saw when you first started?
Sure. Let's talk about some static things. I think that's a good way to really establish what has changed. And the first thing is the need for roofing isn't going anywhere. There's definitely a demand for roofing, and a lot of that is generated, from acts of God, storms, weather-related. And I'm not talking just locally here, even across the country, hurricanes and hailstorms and tornadoes. And there's a lot of acts of God or storm events that cause that need for roofing.
Right.
There's obvious ones like age and decreasing, depreciating value of that system that happens over time. So those aren't going anywhere. Have we made some technological advances to make them more rigid to wind and more resistant to things, longer warranties or life expectancies? Yes, but it still isn't getting rid of the X factors of age and storm-related events that drive the need for new roof replacement. So that still exists, and that's not going anywhere until some major technology changes take place. But looking at that, so we know there's demand.
Yep.
And we know that the technology changes for more storm-resistant materials, they're coming, but they aren't coming as quick as we would anticipate them or hope that they could.
Right.
That the items that have changed have been really related to what our country has gone through in the past couple of years and how COVID has affected supply chains, raw material availability, and then that ultimately affects the availability of materials, completed materials. What that's done as far as labor, the processes that have to exist, because if your plant is in one state, they may have mandates or requirements or proximity, distance, masks, so many elements that exist that only so many people could be in that factory or so close to each other. So one factory in one state may produce at a different factory at a different state.
Right.
And we're seeing more shipping and movement and distribution of shingles from factories where they really shouldn't be sending product from that factory to Indiana or whatever the case may be than we ever have, just to try and keep up with demand. So that's kind of the quick impact.
We're still getting
elaborate that.
Well, didn't mean to interrupt, but when you're talking about shingles coming from different factories where that we may not normally get those shingle batches, they're not mixing batches when they're installing roofs, correct?
Well, technically, intentionally, no.
Okay.
So let's just say that we go to put on a roof project and we have to have that particular product, and we get that product brought in and we use 95% of what they shipped us, and we return the rest to the supplier. What do you think happens to the rest of that? The next time they get a shipment in, that probably gets mixed in. And I get it. People have to sell products. So yes, it can happen more organically rather than intentionally.
Okay.
In that particular case. But the supply chain part of it has just become a very difficult situation to deal with for both the consumer and the contractor and even the manufacturer and supply houses. So it's presented some real challenges over the past year and a half now.
Well, so moving into 2021, what are some things that you'd like to see improve in the roofing industry, and what can a contractor do, or what's in their power to help improve the roofing industry versus them not having any control over like the distribution of materials?
Sure. And that's something that we really just won't have the control over. And looking at, I think you're thinking 2021, but we're moving into 2022. We're almost done with 21 at this point. So we're getting ready to go into fourth quarter here of 21. And we look at the supply chain issues, there's not a projection for those to get better. They're only going to get better over a couple of different ways. We'll see new products into the market that can be produced, maybe materials, synthetics, composites, other roofing surfaces, more metal, other roofing surfaces enter the market that maybe they can produce. It doesn't mean that they'll still be full production. There's paint issues, there's dye issues, there's color issues. Every single component of a roof right now is potentially affected by the supply chain. So looking at other products could be an option. But short of a slowdown in demand, there's not likely going to be an immediate solution to that, the shortages that we have on material. People getting back to work, factories being able to have full capacity, full shifts, full, free reign to produce products is one factor. And ideally, as the whole effects of COVID decrease or slow down, we'd like to see that reflected in our supply chain. Availability of workers, availability to have a full warehouse. That's really a big one. But it'd be great if we could see a slight decrease in demand. And that sounds a little backwards coming from a contractor. We want to stay busy.
Right.
But there could be colder times of the year, more consistent winters that don't just spike with a few storms, but keep things cold enough that limit the production or limit the installation technically of shingles. That could help our supply chain get caught up and then have materials ready for when warmer weather comes around to go back out and install and not have to wait 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks for products.
Well, and not just for on the customer side, and just as a company side, the company has no control over when the materials will be available. But if you're the consumer and you're having to wait 2 months to get your roof installed, they're going to look at you, to be like, hey, what's up?
I think that from an education standpoint, for your homeowner to understand what is going on, not just in roofing, but supplies in general, that there are some slower lead times on supplies helps that process. Because there's examples of, let's say somebody has a red shingle on their roof. There's really only in this region one red shingle being produced, and it's on limited production now because they're trying to keep up with the highest demand colors. Well, it's going to take some knowledge and information and education for that homeowner to truly understand the lead time on that and be able to evaluate, am I that committed to going back with the same look, or should I make a decision for a color change? And what are the domino effects of that? Do they look at then changing siding or paint or other things that could also suffer with lead times as well? So it's a tough climate to work in that regards. And I think the more contractors focus on service and really letting a consumer understand, a homeowner understand the realities of what's going on right now, not in a negative light, but just the realities of what's going on right now, will make a big difference. One scenario that we recently ran into was a repair scenario, and the shingle wasn't even that old, but that particular product is on limited production. It's not available. We can't get it right now to even be able to go perform that repair.
Oh, wow.
And there's going to be a breaking point where it's going to come back to production, and we're ready to go to repair, or there could be a point where they ultimately decide, we haven't manufactured this product for 3-6 months, we're just going to drop that color altogether. And there's going to be homeowners that suffer from that experience unless they have a very, very intelligent contractor to help navigate that process. If it is a claim, how do they navigate that claim to make sure the best interests of that system being restored is being performed in that situation? So there's going to be more repercussions from this supply chain issue to come, and I just think understanding it and educating on it is going to be the most helpful thing in this entire process.
Yeah, I feel like if you're prepared on the company side, then you'll be better off, I guess, explaining that to the homeowner, and then the homeowner will feel better about where you're coming from because they'll understand it.
Absolutely. You can't be blind to it. We're all dealing with the same stuff, so there's not really a tactic or an approach that's going to change or suddenly get those materials there faster. Knowledge, service, education, those are going to go a long way compared to anything else right now.
So if you're a roofing company in 2022 trying to scale, is that still a viable option with all of the supply chain crunches? Or is it something where you want to kind of maintain course and chart something for 2023?
That's a that's a great question from a standpoint of we all want to scale, we all want to grow. And I say that some contractors may be content where they're at. But in general, the goal of building something is to build an equitable model, something that can grow and something that can scale. So as a contractor going into what could be a tougher year or a stagnant year, maybe you just don't have a lot of opportunity of growth and you're trying to set up to scale, there's a lot of things you can consider. Who do you align yourself with? Who do you establish partnerships with? Who do you look at to potentially back you in that time frame? There's larger contractors that may have programs where you can get involved with them, and they may have a little bit more demand in the market or ability to take on the market. They may have resources that you don't have. So smaller contractors need to be looking at where do they spend their time, where do they spend their bandwidth, or do they align with somebody who can assist with that? That's one thought. Otherwise, I'm not a big advocate of just accepting stagnant.
Yeah.
I'm of a growth mindset, but setting your expectation to at least be no lower than where you're at and accomplishing growth goals within that
Right.
are going to be, again, they kind of go back to what are my options. If shingles become a very short supply, are you already skilled at a different roof surface that you can start selling or start installing? And if you aren't, how do you get skilled with that?
Yeah.
If you are predominantly focused on storm damage and not just your average roof replacement from a retail side, no storm claim at all involved, maybe that's the side you need to get more knowledge on to open the opportunities up, or vice versa. If you're predominantly a retail and don't mess with storm damage claims for roof systems, maybe you need to explore so growth is going to come in stepping outside of what your current model is, stepping outside of your comfort zone, learning a new skill, taking a new approach, looking for a new client base that you weren't looking for before, installing different surfaces. But again, that's going to take time and effort and energy and bandwidth away from the company that you're already committed to. You need to align yourself with the right products, the right people, the right giants in the industry, the other leaders, the other companies, the resources that can actually facilitate with the demand, the need, the knowledge, the expertise to make all of that happen, regardless of which path you wanted to add. Whether
Right.
that was a new roofing surface, a new clientele base, whatever it may be, it's seeking the right information and knowledge.
Well, and you brought up storm damage. At least our company, we do primarily storm damage or storm restoration. Should the message to the consumer stay the same? About if a storm comes through, you should still call your roofing company because it's important to spot that damage early on. Even if the materials aren't available at that time, we still know that there's damage. We still know that it needs to be replaced.
I think it's more crucial now than it ever has been, because if a policy, and we can't talk policy as contractors, but in general, if a policy has limitations on how long you have to complete the work, if you waited 6 months to file your claim and then found out you now have a 3 to 6 month lead time on a material,
Yeah.
you could have missed some statute of limitation windows.
Yeah.
So it's so important now more than ever to have consumers educated on the process, the initial inspection, what needs to be done to determine if there's damage there, so they can work within the timelines that whatever coverage they have, whatever policy they have, whatever those limitations are, that they're not facing those limitations based on missed opportunity. And that'd be that first 6 months that you didn't file the claim, that was missed opportunity.
Right.
That could ultimately affect the outcome, where they don't care that that product is not available or discontinued or not in production. You're at the deadline.
Well, do you think enough contractors are educating homeowners in that regard?
I'm fortunate that I get to travel the country and meet with and interact with a lot of different contractors. And in my experience, the education aspect could improve. Do they want the work? Are they looking to do that storm-related work? Yes, there are a lot of contractors looking to do that storm-related work. Are they educating on fear about this damage could cause problems? Or are they educating on real hard points, facts about the process, that there could be limited time frames? It's important to do this early and not wait. The damage may be easier to detect later down the road, but you may be working with limited time frames. So educating with the right information, maybe the gap that exists there. Do they want the work? Are they trying to get the work? Yes, contractors are doing that. how they're getting to it, it varies state to state, contractor to contractor.
Well, yeah, because I feel like we're in the Midwest. We get more hail, tornadoes, wind. But New England area, what do they get? Tornadoes?
Yeah, not the same.
Yeah, the South gets hurricanes.
Right.
So
we just had a big hurricane affect the Louisiana area.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to mentally be aware that you're in a hurricane state, hurricanes affect your state, and this happens, and there's this storm. It's such a great storm. It's got a name. They literally call them named storms. They're named, and they're events, and they're big events, whereas the average household away from hurricane states, and maybe the ones that aren't even close to the tornado belts and areas, when they see a storm and they're less frequent and they're not as used to that whole idea of this large catastrophic storm, they may not understand the importance of getting in and getting that taken care of right away.
I know. I mean, I grew up in the South, and I always had a hurricane kit. If a hurricane was coming through, I had a box and a tub that I could snag with me, and I'd go.
I think that's a valuable thing to understand, but again, if you're not used to that environment,
exactly,
you just aren't going to have the knowledge to think, oh, well, there's a process here. When a storm comes through, I should get this double checked. I should find out just what the condition of my roof is. Is there anything I need to be looking at? Is there anything I need to go address or deal with? There's going to be a greater understanding of that typically in the markets that are more consistently affected. Those markets typically have a lot more contractors because they're more consistently affected. And it's a little bit easier information to digest and less of a learning curve to move the homeowner or policyholder through in that process, because there's a little bit more of an understanding that this happens consistently and we need to get this damage looked at, or there could be concerns going on with this roof.
Right. So I guess summing all of this up, if you want to, what would a final thought be from you, for you at least, going into 2022? What are you focusing on?
I think the contractor should be looking to scale, understand what their baseline is. They don't want to go below this. Understand that this may get a little worse before it gets better.
Right.
There could still be some supply chain issues, and if acts of God present more demand than they do decreased demand, then they need to be ready for this to get worse before it gets better. Great example is the ice storm that happened in Texas.
Yeah.
In general, winter would slow down work, and while that did slow down work, the effects of it were far, 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 far worse, because it created a significant amount of demand for construction, rebuild, water damage, mitigation, framing, drywall, roofing, you name it, it created demand for it. So what could have been something to slow down demand created demand. So I think that's just kind of a quick summary is know what your scaling goals are, who you want to align yourself with, or how you're going to scale outside of your existing model. Know what your baseline is that you're trying to stay at and maintain that baseline of business or book of business, and have the mindset of this could get a little worse before it gets a little better.
Awesome, John. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.